Welcome, everybody, to MentorTime. We're happy to have you here today. As always, we have a topic of the week, and I want to talk about the pros and cons of one-click apply. So here's what we're going to cover today. What is it? What are the advantages? Are there disadvantages? And finally, as always, what does this mean for you? So let's get started with what it is. It may be simple to think about, but in doing my research, as I do my GLIT, my Google Lit review, turns out there was an article in 2012, which I didn't put in here, talking about one-click apply. It's also known as quick apply, apparently, although I don't go on the job boards. Mostly I see it as one-click apply. Basically, you have to create an account, not surprising. And then note this, upload a generic resume and cover letters, usually per instructions. But also note, although they've defined Indeed, ZipRecruiter, a couple others, it's hard to find out who does what. Some of the one-click apply use your LinkedIn profile. And we're going to be talking about what that means also. Another version of what is this from a second article I thought was important to point out. When you have one-click apply enabled and you've uploaded your documents, you will see the button on the job boards. And as you scroll through, if you decide to apply, you just literally click the button and your application goes in some fashion. Now, it makes me nervous to think about that. Other people don't seem so worried about it. But I also wanted to bring this up because this has become really big in the last year or so with LinkedIn, as LinkedIn's gotten more people, more organizations to post their jobs with LinkedIn, actually a lot more. So they have what they call easy apply, although they do say, if you see apply instead of easy apply, that's going to push you out to the company's website to continue applying. All right, let's look at the advantages. This is cast in light of, this is by a company that's selling a one-click apply approach. So it's a sales pitch too. It allows you to save time and don't have to fill out the same information over and over again. And by the way, it not only allows employers to reach out to a larger pool of applicants, they get your stuff in there and they start screening you immediately based on whatever you submitted in that. Remember that generic resume? All right, guess what? Those are the only advantages as far as I could determine, even looking for articles on it. All right. The same article, Manital, also talks about, not indirectly, it actually, in my view, directly encourages quantity rather than quality. If you can sit there and click on 10 or 12 buttons a day after reading through some job postings, you probably spend a half an hour rather than hours applying to each individual one. It does say that despite doing this, the rate of one-click job applications is usually low. And again, I don't know where this data comes from, but they say that it has no impact on the probability that someone will hear back from an employer. And again, not surprising. We don't know. What I couldn't determine is whether employers who get your resume know you went through one click. I don't think they do, because they would get a cover letter and a generic resume, and how would they tell? But who knows, with all the trails there are on the internet, someone's got some cookies tracking us somewhere. All right, so the same article talked about what happens when you do one-click apply. And I put this in red just because I couldn't find a source for it, although I think I have an answer on the next screen. But it basically says the process gets a large quantity of candidates to an employer, and then the employer uses an ATS to sort through and find candidates they want. And I also couldn't find a date for this article. Roughly 40% of orgs don't use an ATS, which surprised me. It's got to be at least a year or two old, because I'm seeing all sorts of global organizations, including UN agencies, that aren't just saying send an email attachment, but rather pushing you into an automated system. When I was looking up that 40% statement on Google, this actually came up from a jobscan.co blog. And this may be where they're fudging and saying 40%, because it said most Fortune 500 companies use an ATS. This Kelly OCG survey says 66% of large and 35% of small orgs use recruitment software. And so if I do my mental calculations, I'm like, oh, okay, they probably invented 40% somewhere. The point is that no matter whether everybody uses an ATS or 40% of orgs don't use an ATS at all, in some fashion, you're going to be screened automatically if you're using that one-click apply, because those orgs have to have some kind of ATS. Another location, a recruiter.com article, talked about no matter whether you apply to a lot of jobs or just a few jobs, they didn't say what your percentage is of successfully hearing back from companies, but they said the response rate difference between the high submitter and the low submitter is only 4%. So as the last sentence says, and I didn't highlight it, but we're not surprised, the best way to get contacted is to have a good cover. I think they meant cover letter. And this is what, back to, again, the Monotal article says, a personalized application, and if you can, go to the location for careers on the company's page and submit there, which is advice I know I've given to a lot of you individually. I may have said this also on MentorTime, and we certainly I both talk about your best opportunity to get an interview from an application is a resume that's tailored, not generic, and to have a cover letter if they ask for it. And this conclusion, again, I couldn't verify this statement. They say that if you go to the website and you follow what the employer says to do, you'll have an advantage over applications coming from an outside source. I don't know how that can be, because if they have an ATS, you're going to be bumped to get to their ATS anyway. But that's why it's in red. I wasn't sure. All right. So what does this mean for you? So you can see that I was highlighting a lot of cons, and let's see how you can rectify some of these. Be aware of how to apply is going to affect you by what you're doing. I just made a point about generic resumes. It makes no sense to have someone upload a generic resume to apply to thousands of jobs. Now, this all started early on, over a decade ago, with Monster.com when they started collecting resumes. But I don't know why it's still persisting. So I went and looked for a job. I chose to look for a job I called leader, or I think program manager, senior program manager. And I got this job and I thought, oh, okay. Had a ton of different requirements with it. Big salary range, big differential, and they may target you by where you live. But I did go straight to find something there that I had seen on LinkedIn. And then I went to their apply now, and instead of create your account and then we'll show you something, they actually threw you into a list of questions. So on the left, you can see the summary of it. The first thing they ask you to do is upload a resume or a CV. And again, people more and more, even globally, are using the word resume and CV, and they're not differentiating them at all. And then, as you'll see, there's this second area. They now want you to cut and paste everything. They don't even pretend that their resume scanning system is going to create it from your resume. They're going to make you cut and paste in all of your detail, which drives all candidates wild, I know. And finally, they do want you to upload a cover letter or type it manually. I hope no one has the experience on this group thinks that you're going to type it manually. All right. Then they push you into all these questions. And these are 2 pages of questions. Degree, do you need sponsorship? What salary range are you interested in? How did you hear about this? And they have 10 different ways to hear about the job. So just so you can be aware, this is from an employer directly. I had no idea when I started the process. I was just trying to get a sense of what it looks like to use the one-click apply. This happened to be the job that actually bumped into a company website that has a lot of detail on it. But I also want to make sure we talk about LinkedIn's Easy Apply. And it really is all about your profile, which is what I assumed all along. And when I did my research over the last few days, I verified that. And this person who wrote about this said, Easy Apply puts a lot of pressure on your profile. Of course, think about it. If you have Easy Apply through LinkedIn, what's LinkedIn going to do? It's going to use the data you entered. If you didn't enter data, it's not in there. So I did discover, and I need to go back because I did a screenshot of this for Save to PDF a few months ago and see. I think Build a Resume is pretty new in here, but maybe not. There's no way to check. But it allows you to build a resume. So I said, okay, I will. So the next step gave me 2 choices, upload the resume or create it from a profile. And I said, oh, I'll see if they'll create it. And I want to see what it looks like. Because the reason I don't recommend using these one-clicks is I don't know how especially with LinkedIn, how they're formatting the data, what they're pulling and how. So I chose a generic title of leader. And it's in their drop-down list. So I thought, oh, okay, I'll do that. And then it immediately pushes you to apply. And what it wants to do is it will apply for you for a variety of positions. So it says, apply to jobs with this resume. And I think what they actually do is create the resume. And then when you find a job, it will send it for you. You can download it as a PDF. And my whole thing is under here, but look at on the right. It says found in your resume. It's got 3 key terms. I would say I've done operations and leadership. I don't do HR. Never have. I know a little bit about it. My suggested keywords. Yes, business processes. You could say that, but I don't do CRM in that way. So I was starting to get alarmed. Ron will recognize this very small graphic on the left. We use this in the course that we give for me being able to capture what people's LinkedIn profiles look like before they work with us. So this is my profile. And not surprisingly, I filled mine in a long time ago. It's pretty complete. It isn't everything I've ever published or written about, sample stuff, but I've got even my honors in there. I've got key skills and things like that. And I have a fair amount of experience in there. So this is what it looks like when they gave me the PDF. And the first thing that I noticed, Ron, you'll love this, is the widows and orphans that show up at the bottom of the first page, the bottom of the second page. There's no formatting here. The information they have at the top is correct. That's about as much as we advise people to use. But my about section, which they're calling a summary, isn't the kind of summary that I recommend you put on a resume. So go through this. My stuff's actually 5 pages long, education at the end, which I think is a good idea that LinkedIn does it that way. And then skills, they give the top 3 to 5 skills and honors and awards. So I'm sitting there saying to myself, they're offering to build a resume. It's beyond 2 pages. What if people, I know that it's loosening up in the US not to have a 2-page resume because it's all on screen, but I can tell you most people aren't going to go beyond the first page, as Ron says. If you can't even get them to scroll down in the second half of the screen, they won't go to the second page. I wanted you to see, though, what LinkedIn does with your data and help you continue to operate, as we always do on these calls, to be informed about the way in which you have to take control of your own what you're putting out there, your professional development and using your professional presence. My summary is there's no shortcuts to applying. You've got to tailor your resume. You've got to write a cover letter or motivational letter if it's requested, and even if it's not. And the third thing is that you really need to make sure that anytime you use shortcuts, whether it's for easy apply or something else, make sure you know how it looks on the other end, what people are going to get from you in this shortened version. Because I don't want that, what I just showed you, I don't want that stuff that LinkedIn didn't format well going out to someone who says, oh, this is how this looks. So here's all the resources that I talked to you about, the articles, and I'll stop there and see Ron, comments, questions, thoughts.
Yeah, that was really interesting, Sue. It's interesting because it wasn't the resume maker, but I just did the download profile using the PDF. Now gives you a slightly different format.
Right, it does.
And yeah. I was doing a consultation with one of my clients because I had down that person's LinkedIn profile. And I was able to check the differences because we were talking about how to improve the LinkedIn profile. Perhaps it would be useful because they call it a resume. I'm going to share mine if I can, Sue.
Yeah, let me make sure I've given you share rights here. Let me stop the share and then give you screen rights.
Yeah, I think I've already got them.
Oh, your co-host. Go ahead. Yeah.
So this is what it looks like. And it looks an awful lot like one of the, because it produces this kind of bar down the side and so on. Some of the things that we criticize when people use this type of format. And it's very similar, in fact, to the individual I was working with had produced an online CV, and this was the kind of format that it did. And it wasn't using LinkedIn. It was using one of these companies that do that sort of thing. So here it is. It basically draws out all the content and then goes to the end with your education and so on. Now, I don't have a lot of material in mind, so it's not particularly full. But the interesting part is, as you said, they call your bio para the summary, and then it includes any of the content here. Plus, it then pulls out these skills, et cetera. Whereas in the resume version, they push those things down closer to the bottom. So I just thought that would be an interesting thing because if you do this, this is called a resume in the PDF file.
Yeah. And you're right. I actually had forgotten. I thought about it last week. And then yesterday when I was doing the resume builder, I didn't remember to put mine in for that same reason, to show that and on mine, the 2 columns are used on 2 pages because they put in honors and awards. They'll put in education in that bar, which then makes you wonder, you can't really, even though they call it a resume, they don't build out the resume that you would apply the same way because they know the 2-column format isn't read by all the ATSs the same way.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. So the reason I thought it would be worthwhile showing that when you showed that, because I was surprised when I saw the one that was built, because I don't remember seeing that resume button when I did that. So that could be really
me either. Yeah.
That could be really new.
Yeah. Did you have any thoughts about this one-click apply? Because it's obviously going everywhere.
Yeah, it's appalling to think that the idea, I understand the concept of
sure.
It's kind of like with Indeed or something like that, where they want you to put your resume into their system and then they're going to farm it out for all over the place. So that's the thinking, I guess, from a third party point of view. But from a commercial company who's doing this themselves, and they create these generic documents and so on, that I think it's really a bit concerning. More than a bit. It's quite concerning because, as you said earlier, is we are pretty sure that tailored documents, tailored letters, and tailored CVs have a higher success rate.
Yeah. Thank you.
We may be dinosaurs, I'm afraid, Sue. Wouldn't that be awful?
If we are, the people we work with are getting jobs. So,
yeah.
And to welcome, I didn't stop in the middle to welcome you. And Peter, did you want to say something? Thank you for your comment about earlier, supporting what I said.
Oh, hi, everyone. Yes. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Ron.
Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, Sue, I'm really glad that you did this because it really confirms my suspicion or reluctance to use these one clicks. Having been on the other side of the table only once or twice of being the interviewer rather than an interviewee, I had a woman that applied. It was for a small organization, but they had to apply with your LinkedIn profile button or whatever. And Yeah, I never did it prior to that because I thought, I don't know what that gives you. And this was back in like 2016, 2017, somewhere in there. And yeah, it gave us basically a printout of our whole LinkedIn profile. And when I saw that, and I didn't print it out, but the other woman that I was interviewing, that on the company team that was interviewing, she printed it out. And yeah, it was like 7 pages long.
Yeah.
Same thing. Just what you said. You can't get them to read even 2 pages. How are you going to get them to read 7?
Yeah.
And so I'm glad to know that it's a bad idea. Even if I find a job on DevX or whatever, or Relief Web, I always go directly to the company's website and track down with the job number, just for that exact thing of I'm doing it directly on their website because it's going to give them the exact format that they want, with all of the questions that they want. And so that just gets it all. And so I also thought it was funny that they picked out all these keywords on yours that didn't apply.
I know.
If I don't have control over it, then it's not me applying. And so I'm glad to have that confirmation.
Yeah. Yeah. Public health didn't appear anywhere. Program eval didn't appear.
All the things that you would put at the top.
Of course.
So
yeah.
Why would you want that?
Oh.
Yeah.
No, thank you, Peter. That's really useful to know. When you have applied in the last year or so, you've applied to Gavi and other places. I did notice with some recent mentees that are applying to UN jobs that parts of the UN system, like UN Women, are using ATSs. Is that your experience, or were you also sending emails and with a cover letter and resume attachments?
Almost always it's been an ATS, especially for bigger organizations. If it does give me an email, right, to say email this person with your, I will almost always apply, even if I feel like I'm not necessarily the best fit right out of the bat, but just because I feel like it's going to somebody and it might actually get read.
Yeah.
And they might say, oh, not for this job, but I know another job that I want.
Yeah.
So if I think that somebody's going to read it, then I'll email it. I mean, as long as it's not like something that as long as it's not asking for an HR manager or something like that, like if it's in my field, but almost always an ATS. Nowadays, it's very seldom not. And even like you mentioned this too, they all ask you to upload a PDF of your resume and then enter in that same exact information.
I know.
Usually in the most frustrating way possible. So you have to separate it out, and it never, even if it does parse it, it never parses it. It's got your job title under the organization name, and the dates are all in the wrong place. But yeah, so
I know.
It gets frustrating. You put a YouTube on in the background and you do all your copying and pasting, and it takes a while, but you get through it.
It sounds like the way I operate. I've always got some kind of TV on when I'm doing stuff or streaming on. Yeah. Thank you. Right. Any other comments?
Just a comment actually from what Peter said is that there's, of course, this distinction between the automatic management systems or track ATMs and so on. These kinds of systems is not quite the same thing as one-click apply, although they may actually incorporate one-click. So there's 2 different things. And I guess one-click apply sounds like it's a third-party utility that companies are using. Yeah, that seemed to be what you were showing there. So it sounds like a service that they will purchase because they're lazy or some other reason. But what Peter said, I don't know, confirms, especially if there's an email. And some of the people I've worked with, that's what they've done is they found the email for the person, the hiring manager or whoever, and send it off, or they know somebody working at the organization and they'll say, who should I send this to? Because blah, blah, and then they'll go that route. But yeah.
That latter strategy works well. It's more of a networking thing. The finding the hiring manager or the HR person's name, they're so inundated, they're not going to likely see it anyway, unless it comes in. Also, remember, they use the ATS as their tracking system. So they have to report numbers to how many positions get X number of applications, whatever. But I think the biggest issue we have is that the work that you do to get this stuff into an application, even on one-click apply, Sorry, we have Halloween visitors starting early. If you could hear that announcement from my echo say, oh, good. I know this is not an omnidirectional mic, which is why I got it. All right. So the one-click apply will not reduce let me back up. What we are going to find is more and more ways that they are going to continue to try to get their stuff in a format that, remember, we've looked at ATSs in previous mentor times. I did a short thing on it a few months ago, I believe. They're not all the same. Last I heard, there are over 100 companies. When I first started looking at them way back in 2017, I found that there were 30 and a couple had just been bought out by IBM. But it reminds me of what the medical profession's been going through, or healthcare, with the idea of an electronic health record, because every company that's selling one will tailor it to what Johns Hopkins wants versus George Washington. And what happens is none of that stuff talks to each other, which is why you have to cut and paste into the way they want to hear it, like them writing their job descriptions differently or the job postings. So let me stop there and see if anybody has any other comments.
The other thing I was thinking is that for the sites that you would put your resume on, that I've done in the past, putting a generic one on, the only website that didn't just end up in all spam was DevX.
Yeah.
All the others, all I ever got was spam and people calling about sales rep jobs and things that I would have no possible interest in. And then, but DevX, I've had it be a more directed solicit of they don't tell you the company, or the couple that I've done. It's at least something in my field, whereas all the others have just been total waste of time. I just end up deleting it. I haven't done it for a while now, but back in those days, I just deleted them all when it was Monster or Indeed or a couple others. So I stay away from them totally now.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder. I know when Monster came online over a decade ago, I tried it out just looking at it and it was just horrific. But as others have come along, they can't help it. Luckily for us, DevX is a professional development organization, professional representation globally. Did you have a paid membership? Because I know their services cut way back a few years ago.
I didn't have a paid membership. Maybe you can give advice on that. I never knew if it was really advantageous to do a paid membership.
Well, I never did because I wasn't working at the time, but every time I saw a job there that I not wanted for me, but for mentees before Idealist grew even more, before Relief Web, you could find jobs on DevX. So if I saw a UNICEF job, I'd take the number. I would search every way to go directly to it. I just want to stop for a minute. Venchal, do you mind if I talk a little bit about your applications and what we went through when we were first looking at the SOFIS website?
Yes, no, go ahead. You can use it as an example.
Great. So Venchal asked me almost a year ago, I think, to work with her because she's applying for DRPH programs, a doctor in public health, to start next year. And knowing Venchal, she's always very organized. So she was way back in January, we started looking at what the application process was. And the grad schools, no different from jobs, have all centralized it into this SOPHAS system. And I can't remember what exactly it stands for. But each university either said, put everything in here. So you have to have a personal statement. You have to have your demographics, all of that. And then I can't remember if it's Johns Hopkins or which one it was, Venchal, that wanted you to write something special about the passion with which you were going to pursue and whatever.
Yeah, I think it was either Johns Hopkins or University of North Carolina. And just to note, since the last time we saw these websites, University of North Carolina was on SOFIS, but now they're using their own platform.
Oh, interesting.
That program is no longer using SOFA. So that's
interesting.
Something to keep in mind. Yeah.
And what you're pointing out is they're voting with their feet and their money, saying this isn't helping us. We want our own and we want control over it. I guess the advantage I saw from what Venchel had to do is it was all centralized. So you didn't have to go to each, when you went to each school's website and looked at how to apply, it said, blah, 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 blah. If you're great and wonderful and you're going to make lots of money and reflect well on the school, then push here and apply. That's the implications. And that pushed you to the SOFA website. I think the centralization of it is good. The personalization of it wasn't clear, because every one of these 4 or 5 universities that she and I looked at together after she had called out and selected her high priority ones, all had some version of wanting you to be able to describe your research and what you want to do and what you're interested in. But they, again, just like a personal statement used to be in the old days, and what I've worked with others on, is everyone wanted it differently. One was like, tell us what you're going to do great things with. One was like, tell us the university professor that's closest to what you want to do and how that's going to help you and all that. So let me stop there. But what I wanted to say, thank you for letting me bring this up, is just that also graduate school is also now being pushed into that kind of one-click apply kind of thing. But it's all yours, Venchel.
No, I was just going to say, I completely agree with you. And then when I went back and looked at the SOFIS application, I think there's, if you click on additional program information, each program, like you have the possibility to send like your different personal essays and what have you. So I guess the personalization is if you click on that tab, program information, but you're right. The rest of it is pretty general.
All right, that's good to know. Thanks for letting us have that example for others as well, because that's helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Any last comments before we go to the chat box? All right. Any questions from anybody before we close? It's been fun discussing this with you. I'm going to ask Ron to, after I show you our image credits. Ron, if you'll close the meeting, that would be great.
Muted. There. The button didn't click. Anyway, thanks very much, everyone, for your contributions. This was a lively discussion. I really enjoyed it myself. And I learned things because I'm not familiar with these automatic systems in the same way that Sue is. And so I certainly find that I learned something. And I learned from each of you who are attending. Thanks very much for being part of my mentoring system. And thank you for contributing to MentorTime. And thanks, Sue, again, for all the work you put in. And I hope that everyone will have a great week until we join again